This is page 61 in our notes, and we are continuing our EE8 notes. This is one standard. This is for CFA 6. Couple things I want to do in these notes. We have the notes from the Discovery Ed worksheet, so we definitely have the notes from the Discovery Ed worksheet that we've done. You had the homework, which was page 108, 109. We're going to take these notes as well on page 61. You're going to have cards on the back of page 61. And these are all the things that are going to help us with this particular standard, EE8. You're also going to have one more worksheet. You'll also have a worksheet that is a Discovery Ed that we are also going to work on together. So you're going to have all of these things to help study for EE8. So first off, I want to start by just writing down important things that we have learned about this particular standard, EE8. First off, if I start with y equals 3x plus 2. Do you remember what we refer to this as? We call this an equation. So I'm going to box this in here. This is what we're calling an equation. Part of this standard, you have to be able to write an equation or look at an equation and use that for a table and graph it. So we have the equation. That's part of the standard, an equation. You also need to be able to identify the independent and dependent variables. Dependent is always out here by itself. It's always y. It depends on what we plug in for x. So if this is the dependent variable, then x is your independent variable. You have to know the difference between them. So x is inside the equation, y kind of depends on what we plug in here for x, okay? So then you're going to have a question on your test that asks, so I want to make sure you understand this, so we're going to write this question in. What is the relationship between the independent, I'm going to kind of abbreviate here, variable, and the dependent variable in this equation? So that's what the question is going to ask. I want to make sure you understand how to answer this. What am I looking for the answer? So we're asking for what's the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable in this equation. So what type of answer would I be looking for here? First off, you need to know the difference between these. So when you give me your answer, I'm looking that you understand which one is which. So your answer might say something like, looking at this equation, that the independent, see how I'm using the word independent variable, and then tell me which one it is. Is it x or y? Do you remember which one it is? The independent variable is x. There you go. First off, you're stating that you know which one is the independent variable in your answer. And then the dependent variable, which is which other letter? It is y. Our variable is y. Is always going to be, and then here's where you have to use the equation. How is y related to x? It is always going to be 3 times the amount x is, and then you would have to add 2, or say plus 2. So what's a way to write what this is? You could say, I'm going to put it in parentheses, you could say 3 times x, then plus 2. Or what's another way you could write it? Some people see it as 2 more than 3 times x. They are the same thing. You could write it this way or this way. Where am I getting these clues from? I'm using the equation to write that in for those clues. So I'm looking for a few things in your answer. You need to say what the independent variable is, state that, and then you need to state that the dependent variable is what compared to that. Well, in this case, you're going to use this clue. What if it said 3x plus 1? Then you would have to say 3 times x then plus 1, or 1 more than 3 times x. So it just depends on what your equation is. Give you a chance to write that. Now we're going to do another one for practice. So what if, like on the test, I give you a table. So I'm going to give you a table. This is on the test, so I want to make sure you know this. And so on the table, I give you something like x and y. And then I give you 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 5, 4, 7, 5, 9. I gotta extend my table down a little bit. So I give you the table, and then I ask you to write the equation for this table. And so I've given you the table, and now I'm asking, what is the equation? So you got to know what the equation is for this table. You have to know how I want the equation written. Remember, the equation is always y equals something I do to the x column to get to y. It's going across, not down, it's going across. What am I doing to x, the x column, to get y? My recommendation is you always start at the bottom of the table, and you make sure it works for this one, and then it works for this one, and continue to work up. If you start at the top, it's like you add 0, it works, you know? And then if you add 0, it doesn't. So then you add 1, you add 2, you add... Your equation can't change each time. It has to be the same every single time. Well, if I say 5, what can I do to get 9? Well, I add 4. Well, if I add 4 to 4, I get 8. That's not correct. So it has to work across. It can't change each time you go up each row. So you've got to figure out, what am I doing? Some people see, well, what if I like do 2 things? Like, what if I multiply and then add, or multiply then subtract? So if I start at 5, what's going to get me close to 9? Like, what if I double it? 5 times 2 is 10. I'm close, but then I'd have to subtract 1 to get 9. We'll try that again. If I take 4 and I double it, I get 8, and if I subtract 1, does that give me 7? Oh, it does, so it's starting to work. Okay, so if I double 3, I get 6, subtract 1, I get 5. It seems to be working. You need to make sure it works all the way through the table. How do I do that? Well, if I think the y is that I'm taking x and doubling it, I would write that as 2 times x, I'm doubling it, and then I'm subtracting 1. I'm saying this should be my equation. This should work every single time to get y. So here's where I check it. So I start with, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to give you this one. This one I was supposed to leave blank, and you were supposed to fill in and figure this out. So I would check this, and I would say, does 2 times 5, which is my x value, that equals 10, and when I subtract 1, I get 9. Yep, that's true. 2 times 4, I get 8. When I subtract 1, I get 7. So it's kind of like looking at my x values, 5 and 4, I'm getting 9 and 7. So I just keep checking. Does 2 times 3, this x value, that gives me 6, subtract 1, I get 5. 2 times this x value, 2, I get 4, subtract 1, I get 3. So then try it here. Does 2 times 1, which gives me 2, when I subtract 1, give me 1. So it's like I've checked these ones here were all x. Did I get my y's over here when I plug them in to each part of the table? Yes, that's why this equation works. I take the x column and I'm doubling it, and then I subtract 1 to solve. Then I'm going to ask you another question, and since I kind of messed this up, we'll just go down a little bit further on this table. And the question is going to say, what is the relationship between the independent variable, and I'm abbreviating, and the dependent variable, question mark. Same question I asked you up above. What is the relationship? And what type of answer would I expect you to write here? Well, look at our equation. Our equation was y equals 2 times x minus 1. That's the equation we were using. You have to use the equation to answer the relationship between independent and dependent. You have to know which one's independent and which one's dependent. So what type of answer would I be looking for? Well, how did I start my answer up above? I started with stating which one the independent variable is. So is that going to change? Nope. You would start with the independent variable is which one? And you should be able to tell me. It is x. The dependent variable is which other one do I need to know? It is y. Is always going to be, and then here's where I write in my clue. How is y related to x? What did we do to each problem? We always doubled x and then we had to subtract 1, right? So what's a way to write that? You could say 2 times x then minus 1. That's one way to say it. Or you could even say 1 less than 2 times x. They mean the same thing, 1 less than that. So if you take times 2 and then 1 less than that. So that's how we figured out that it worked on the table. Remember, it always has to go across on the table, across on the table. So the next question that I might ask you on your test, what if the independent variable is, and I'm going to go up a step and I want to say, well, I kind of gave it to you already. I said, what if it is 5? What is the dependent variable? And so what I would have had to have done is I was supposed to stop the table and then add a line on here. What is the dependent variable? That's my question here. So you have to know, notice I never say x or y. You have to know independent variable is 5. What's the dependent variable? In other words, we have to know if x equals 5, then what is y going to equal? And we solved that up here. We said it was 9. You could use our equation to help us. We take 2 times 5, which was our x. Remember, y equals 2x minus 1. So we put a 5 in here for x, and then we subtract 1. 2 times 5 is 10, and I subtract 1. I'm going to get 9 for my y. So it's kind of like looking up here. What do kids often miss on the test? They will come up here and say, oh, if it's 5, then the other one's 3. But I didn't say, what if the dependent variable is 5? What's their independent? I said, what if the independent variable is 5? What's the dependent? In other words, I'm looking to check. Independent, you have to know is x. Dependent is y. I don't want you to come up here and find 5 and then say, oh, it would be 3. Because I was asking for independent variables 5, not dependent variable. This is one that people will answer down below because they think that's what I'm asking here. But I never say x or y. I use the words independent and dependent. You have to know the independent is x and dependent is y.